There are whispers in the dark that even the Emperor's name cannot silence. In the scorched echoes of battlefields where demons once danced and reality itself screamed, there exists a void, not just of life, but of memory. Where others leave monuments or scars, the Grey Knights leave nothing. No testimony, no corpse, no trace. Only an aching silence, more ominous than the threat they vanquished. They are not merely the hammer of the Emperor. They are the hand that sweeps away the shattered pieces before the light of day can catch them. To speak of the Grey Knights is to trespass into a realm where heroism and horror entwine. Their existence is a sanctioned heresy, a sacred contradiction. No chapter is so revered and yet so shrouded, their name passed in hushed tones even among the highest echelons of the Imperium. This is not just a tale of warriors, but of watchers, of those who not only kill the demonic, but erase its aftermath from the minds and records of the galaxy. This is the story of what the Grey Knights erase, from battlefields, from history, and from the very soul of mankind. They say the Grey Knights were born at the twilight of an empire, when the Imperium faced its darkest hour, not in the crucible of battle, but in the crucible of truth. Their origin is a tale hidden beneath layers of myth, forbidden knowledge, and erased testimony. The official record speaks only in riddles, a secret founding, a clandestine gathering of 8 extraordinary psychers and the shadow of Malcador the Sigillite. These fragments are not enough to form a clear picture, but they are enough to hint at something more profound and terrifying. The Grey Knights were not simply made. They were chosen, sculpted from the purest psychic clay, to become humanity's ultimate bulwark against the demonic. Their creation was not a declaration of strength, but an admission of fear. The Emperor himself, it is whispered, knew that the warp could never be fully sealed, and so he prepared a final shield for the days to come. Fan theories run rampant in the vacuum left by silence. Some say the 8 were custodians who turned against their role. Others claim they were perpetuals like Vulcan, beings capable of surviving the warp's deepest corruption. There are even those who believe one among them was a clone of the Emperor himself, or perhaps an echo of Magnus before his fall. But the truth may be darker than any theory dares propose. It is possible that the 8 were never meant to survive at all, that their very souls were sacrificed in some hidden rite to infuse the Grey Knights with incorruptible resilience. If this is true, then the Grey Knights are not simply descendants of heroes. They are weapons born from a pact with inevitability, forged in a secret too black for even the Inquisition to name. The peculiar absence of a known Primarch only deepens the mystery. Every other chapter traces its legacy back to one of the 20 sons of the Emperor, but the Grey Knights have no such lineage. Instead, they claim their gene seed is pure, a claim so audacious, so defiant of genetic logic, that it must either be a lie of galactic proportions or a miracle of horrifying consequence. Some have speculated that their gene seed may stem directly from the Emperor himself, harvested in the waning days of the Horus Heresy. If so, then their purity is not a boast, it is a burden. To be born from the Emperor's own essence would make the Grey Knights not just his sons, but his shadow, tasked with performing the deeds he could not or would not do in life. Yet, for all this sacred origin, the foundation of the Grey Knights reeks of paranoia. The secrecy surrounding their birth wasn't a precaution. It was a wall, a quarantine against the very knowledge of their existence. Even among the Inquisition, knowledge of the chapter is rare and compartmentalized. Only those within the Order Malleus know of the Knights in any detail, and even then, only what the chapter permits. This tight control over information, this obsession with containment, suggests a deeper truth. The Grey Knights are not merely protectors of the Imperium. They are its fail-safes. They were not created to fight beside the Imperium, but to act when the Imperium itself becomes a liability. They are the Emperor's unspoken will, enacted in the shadows of collapsing realities. Their founding also casts a long shadow over every other chapter. If the Grey Knights are truly incorruptible, then what does that say about their brothers who fall to chaos? If their minds are immune to demonic possession, then what makes the rest of the Adeptus Astartes so vulnerable? This unspoken judgment burns beneath every encounter. The Grey Knights are proof that purity can be engineered, that flawlessness is possible, and so their existence is both an inspiration and an accusation. They stand as a silent rebuke to the failures of the Imperium, a living reminder that its corruption is not inevitable, only tolerated. In the end, the founding of the Grey Knights is not a tale of glorious birth, but of necessity. They were not made for glory. They were made for erasure. Their origin is a mystery preserved by design, not by accident. Every trace of their creation is a wound carefully sutured by time and terror. Because to truly understand where they came from would be to admit what the Imperium fears most, that some truths are too dangerous not because of what they reveal, but because of what they require us to become. There is a place in the solar system where even the stars seem to dim, a shrouded moon cloaked in psychic silence and anchored to reality by force of will alone. Titan, the fortress monastery of the Grey Knights, does not merely exist. It imposes itself upon existence. To approach it is to feel one's thoughts fray at the edges, as though the very concept of self becomes less certain the closer one gets. It is not protected by walls, void shields, or even fleets, though all those things exist. Titan's true defense is metaphysical. It is hidden not just from sight, but from memory, from prophecy, from the skeins of fate itself. Demons cannot perceive it. Scryers see only mist. It is a place as close to untouchable as anything in the Materium can be, and it must be, for the truths it guards are too dangerous to be known. Within Titan lies not only the sacred armory and libraries of the Grey Knights, but the crucible of their very souls. The moon is host to rituals of unmaking and rebirth, trials so profound that even veteran Astartes would weep blood to endure them. The Librarium of Titan holds records not of history, but of annihilation, events so corrosive to the Imperium's psyche that they have been excised from all other sources. The planet is a mausoleum for memories that should not exist, a vault where not only weapons but truths are locked away. It is said that every Grey Knight must undergo psychic scourging and soul fortification here, not merely to fight demons, but to resist the unbearable weight of knowing too much. Titan is not a home. It is a wound that never closes, an unceasing reminder that ignorance is not just bliss, it is survival. Unlike the mobile fortress monasteries of other chapters, Titan is immobile because it does not need to move. The Grey Knights project power through teleportation strikes, psychic beacons, and direct warp insertion. This allows Titan to remain isolated, untouched, a still point in a galaxy of chaos. Its surface is cloaked in void-warded spires and gleaming halls of silver and obsidian, but these are mere shells for what lies beneath. Buried within are labyrinthine vaults containing relics so dangerous they are not even named, living prisoners who exist outside of time, and mechanisms whose function is understood only in visions. The Grey Knights do not worship these things. They guard them, loathe them, and are prepared to die rather than allow them to be released. No other chapter in the Imperium is permitted access to Titan, not even the Custodes or the High Lords. Those who are brought here, rare inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus, sanctioned psychers, or occasionally condemned traitors, do not leave unchanged. Some are stripped of their minds and remade as blank servitors, their memories flayed and rewritten by psychic flame. Others are allowed to leave with only fragments of memory, blank pages where entire days once lived. Titan itself seems to abhor visitors, and even the most hardened warriors speak of dreams filled with echoing screams and visions of eyes that see through time. This is no coincidence. The fortress is alive in a sense, not sentient, but psychically active. It bends perception, warps memory, and rewrites causality to preserve its sanctity. The Grey Knights themselves are shaped by Titan as much as they shape it. Each knight returns here not just between missions, but between selves. They undergo memory audits, psychic purges, and rituals of re-sanctification. What they witness in the warp, what they do in the name of secrecy, cannot be carried unchecked. Their minds are scrubbed, not by machines, but by brother librarians trained in soul surgery. Memories are sealed away, buried beneath layers of mental wards, or sometimes simply erased. Titan is not merely where they are trained, it is where they are cleansed, over and over again. Titan's very existence raises questions the Imperium is unwilling to face. Why must such a place be hidden so absolutely? What kind of truths require entire moons to quarantine them? And what does it say about the Imperium that its greatest protectors must live in such isolation, treated as both angels and pariahs? The answer, of course, lies in the very nature of their war. The Grey Knights do not merely fight demons, they resist becoming vectors of demonic knowledge. Titan is the psychic firewall of humanity, a moon that holds the line not with force, but with silence, and in that silence, something terrible slumbers. Perhaps it is not the Grey Knights who keep Titan sealed, but Titan that keeps them. Perhaps in its depths, the moon remembers things they would rather forget, and each time a brother returns, he is reminded not only of what he protects, but of what he has become. A guardian of secrets so foul, so pure, they can only be spoken in screams. There is a ritual the Grey Knights enact more faithfully than any battle rite or sacred litany, the Purge, not of Xenos or heretics, but of truth itself. When the battle ends, their war does not. The wipe protocols begin. They are not guidelines or tactical doctrines. They are absolute imperatives burned into every brother's mind, more sacred than their oaths to the Emperor. After the demon is banished, after the last cultist breathes his blasphemy, the Grey Knights set to work, cleansing not just the battlefield, but the memory of the battle. They do not leave ruins for archaeologists or saints to sanctify. They leave nothing. Bodies are incinerated, atomized down to psychic residue. Machines that recorded any part of the conflict, servo skulls, Vox systems, even Adeptus Mechanicus data looms, are destroyed or wiped clean by techno-exorcists. Structures corrupted by the warp are reduced to ash with melta charges or purged by orbital strikes. But the most chilling aspect of the wipe protocols is not the destruction of the dead, it is the treatment of the living. Survivors are liabilities. Knowledge is contagion. Any guardsman who witnessed a demon, any Inquisitor's acolyte who saw a Grey Knight fight, becomes part of the problem. Some are memory scrubbed through psychic intervention. Others are simply executed, their sacrifice marked not with honor, but necessity. Even high-ranking Imperial commanders are not exempt. There are tales, whispered among the Ordo Hereticus, of entire bridge crews vanishing after a battle where a Grey Knight fought alongside them. In some cases, fleet captains were rewarded for their valor one day and purged the next. The Knights make no apologies, offer no explanations. The mere presence of a demon demands secrecy so intense it distorts the Imperium's very record of war. Entire campaigns have been erased, their victories attributed to other regiments or removed from history altogether. It is not uncommon for a war zone ravaged by a demonic incursion to be reclassified as a meteorological anomaly or xeno encounter, even when entire populations vanish overnight. The wipe protocols are not uniformly brutal. They are meticulously calculated. A librarian will assess psychic contamination levels. A purifier may detect traces of warp corruption in a survivor's aura. Depending on the reading, a subject might receive a false memory, crafted and implanted through psychic suggestion, or be handed over to the Inquisition for further observation, often in oubliettes beneath Terra itself. But these are rare mercies. More often, the answer is finality. A bolt round to the skull, a dose of neurotoxin, a surgical cleansing that leaves only ash. Why such extremity? Because the Grey Knights understand the warp in a way no other Imperial force does. They know it is not the demon itself that is most dangerous, it is the memory of it. To see a demon and survive is to carry a wound in the soul, an opening through which corruption can whisper. The warp does not need to shout. It merely needs someone to remember. The wipe protocols are not acts of cruelty, but acts of containment. The battlefield is a psychic wound, and the knights cauterize it with fire, silence, and blood. Sometimes entire cities are destroyed, not because they fought the enemy poorly, but because they saw too much. Sometimes a single guardsman's testimony is enough to doom a planet. There are reports, heavily redacted of course, of the Grey Knights launching exterminatus campaigns not for failure to resist chaos, but for success, for fighting too well, for surviving encounters no mortal should. The logic is cruel but implacable. Those who survive the impossible are no longer innocent. They are infected, and the Imperium cannot afford infection. The wipe protocols do not stop at material evidence. They reach into the very fabric of remembrance. Medals are awarded for phantom victories. Memorials are erected with the wrong names. In one case, a planetary governor's face was psychically altered to resemble a hero who never lived, because the actual defenders had been wiped out, deemed too dangerous to leave behind. The truth is not just buried. It is overwritten. Reality, as preserved by the Imperium, is a lie forged for stability. And yet, within this lie, the Grey Knights find a twisted kind of purity. They do not kill out of hatred or pride. They erase because it is necessary. Because the alternative is a galaxy where chaos seeps through every crack of memory, where each tale of heroism becomes a gateway for something older, darker, more hungry. Their war is fought not just with swords and bolters, but with forgetfulness. And in that forgetting, the Imperium survives, wounded, blind, but still breathing. They walk among nightmares with serenity etched into their silver helms, yet even within the sanctum of the Grey Knights, there exists a deeper order, a brotherhood within the brotherhood. These are the keepers of silence, the guardians of forgetting. Their names are not spoken, not because they are unknown, but because they are forbidden. To name them would be to admit their purpose, and that purpose is more horrifying than any demon they purge. This is the brotherhood of erasure. Among the Grey Knights, every warrior is expected to resist corruption, to steel himself against the psychic whispers of the warp. But some are selected, marked from the beginning, for a different task altogether. These knights are trained not only in the art of war, but in the discipline of memory manipulation, psychic compartmentalization, and sanctioned forgetfulness. They are the silencers of truth, not assassins, but unmakers. They walk into battles not merely to cleanse, but to absorb and then to forget. They are memory vaults in ceramite, armored minds that carry secrets for as long as needed, then purge them into oblivion. It begins with initiation rites even more severe than the ordinary trials. These chosen are subjected to extended periods of psychic duress, locked in stasis coffins while demonic imagery is psychically burned into their minds, and then erased, over and over. The purpose is not resistance, but pliability. They must learn to carry horror not with defiance, but with detachment. A Grey Knight purifier might face the warp with a blazing soul. A member of the Brotherhood of Erasure must let it pass through him like water through a sieve, touching nothing, leaving no ripple. These knights undergo psychic surgery that borders on mutilation. Sections of their minds are cordoned off by the chapter's most gifted librarians. Thoughts are stored in neural oubliettes, locked vaults within the mind that can only be opened by specific stimuli or psychic command phrases. Entire missions may be sealed this way, allowing a knight to return from a campaign without even knowing what he did. The Brotherhood carries these keys and unlocks them only when absolutely necessary. In this way, the chapter maintains operational integrity without risking psychic contamination or memory leakage. Some of the Brotherhood are tasked with handling the memories of others. They walk the battlefields after the fighting ends, not with bolters, but with hands raised in solemn invocation. They touch the foreheads of dying guardsmen and extract their last thoughts. They kneel beside fellow knights whose minds are fraying under the strain of demonic exposure, and gently remove the offending memory, like a surgeon excising a tumor. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes the contamination is too deep, and the only solution is oblivion, death by their own hand, swift and merciful. They do not weep, they do not falter, because their oath is not to victory, it is to forgetting. There are rumors that the Brotherhood of Erasure is also the final refugee for knights who have seen too much. A kind of monastic retirement, not into peace, but into deeper silence. These knights cease to speak altogether, adopting a vow of psychic silence that severs them from their brothers. They become watchers, custodians of the chapter's darkest truths. Some believe they are buried alive beneath Titan, existing in a kind of suspended animation, dreaming only in fragments of wars no one else remembers. Others say they become the chapter's living wards, human psychic seals used to keep forbidden relics locked away. Whether these tales are myth or warning, none can say. But every knight knows the look in a brother's eyes when he has been marked for the Brotherhood. It is not fear, it is absence. A soul prepared to vanish. The emotional toll is immense. Even for Astartes, creatures bred to suppress emotion, the cost of forgetting oneself is staggering. Some knights lose not just memories, but parts of their identity. They forget names, faces, oaths. One might stand among his squad and no longer remember why he took the field. Another might speak a phrase, only to realize it unlocks a cascade of horrors he cannot explain. These moments are rare, but when they occur, the Brotherhood responds swiftly. The knight is taken back to Titan, where he is cleansed or, if need be, entombed. This is the silent war within the silent war. While the Imperium battles the physical corruption of chaos, the Brotherhood of Erasure fights a war for the integrity of memory, for the purity of the soul through enforced amnesia. Their battlefield is the mind, and their enemy is recollection. They destroy not just demons, but the echoes they leave behind. And yet, in some cruel way, they may be the most faithful of all. For they sacrifice not their lives, but their truths. They give up their pasts, their comrades, their glories, so the Imperium may sleep unknowing. In the hollow echo of their silence, humanity is spared, and no one will ever thank them. No one will ever know. That is their triumph. That is their curse. To fight beside the Grey Knights is to risk annihilation not by the enemy, but by the very hands that fought to protect you. This truth lies buried beneath medals and oaths, because if it were spoken plainly, the Imperium would shudder at its implications. For the Grey Knights, every ally is a potential threat, not in betrayal, but in knowledge. In the Imperium, ignorance is a weapon, and those who see too much become liabilities. Thus, allies become enemies the moment the last demon falls. The Astra Militarum has bled alongside the Grey Knights on uncounted battlefields, though the records rarely show it. Guardsmen called to the front lines, often by inquisitorial command, find themselves part of something far beyond their comprehension. They see silver-armored giants moving with the precision of gods, wielding psychic fire and chanting names of power older than the stars. If they survive, and survival is rare, they are met not with honor, but with evaluation. The Grey Knights do not speak, they do not explain, they observe, and then they act. In some cases, a regiment that witnesses a demonic manifestation may be subjected to psychic purging. Librarians implant false memories, rewrite battle reports, and even alter the emotional residue of the survivors to prevent psychic echo. This is the most merciful outcome. In many cases, however, the judgment is final. An entire company may be declared compromised, marched to a pre-dug mass grave, and executed with bolter and flame. It is said in hushed tones that some regiments no longer exist, not because they died in battle, but because they fought beside the Grey Knights and lived. These actions are not limited to lowly guardsmen. Even space marines are not safe. There are tales of brother chapters being wiped from the record after aiding the Grey Knights in a warp-heavy campaign. In the rare cases where other Astartes are deemed too vital to execute, their memories are forcibly altered, their battle honors purged, their armor scrubbed of heraldry and painted anew. They return to their chapters changed, though they do not know why. They dream of silver giants and fire without flame. Their chaplains call it warp scarring. The truth is far worse. Even Inquisitors tread lightly. While they technically outrank the Grey Knights, authority becomes irrelevant when survival is at stake. The Ordo Malleus, which works most closely with the Knights, has protocols for memory exchange, clearance codes, and mind shielding. Yet even then, there are instances where Inquisitors who overstep their welcome disappear. A confrontation with a demon prince might end with victory, but if that Inquisitor probes too deeply into how it was defeated, if they see what they were not meant to, they may find themselves sanctioned, silenced, or psychically dissected. There is a tragic irony here. The Grey Knights are defenders of humanity, yet must regard humanity as a contamination risk. They are warriors of unmatched honor who must perform acts of calculated ruthlessness. They do not revel in this role. They carry it like a chain across their shoulders. But carry it they must. Every ally is judged not on valor, but on exposure. To witness the Grey Knights at work is to flirt with damnation, not because they are corrupt, but because they fight what must never be seen. Some allies try to resist. Commissars raise their voices in protest, claiming authority. Planetary governors plead for their lives, invoking ancient pacts and tithes. It does not matter. The Grey Knights do not argue. They do not explain. They cleanse. It is better in their eyes for a loyal regiment to die in purity than live with knowledge that might one day doom a planet. There is no appeal, no tribunal, only silence. And still the Imperium calls upon them. Still, regiments are sent into the unknown, unaware of the cost of survival. This is the hidden cost of victory, the invisible tombstones of the faithful. A world saved by the Grey Knights may never know who saved them. A commander who stood his ground may be erased for daring to look too closely at what walked beside him. This is the paradox of their existence. They must be seen to act, but must never be remembered. In this dynamic, we see the cruel necessity of the Imperium's survival strategy. The demonic is not just an external threat. It is a viral idea, a mimetic corruption. By sterilizing the witnesses, the Grey Knights sterilize the narrative. They create blank spaces in history, gaps filled with sanctioned lies. And through these lies, the Imperium endures. Yet one cannot help but wonder, how many heroes has the Imperium destroyed to protect itself? How many alliances have been severed by silence? In the ashes of forgotten triumphs, what is left of honor? The Grey Knights know the answer. They carry it in their unspoken guilt, and they bury it with every ally they leave behind. To understand the necessity of secrecy is to confront the essence of the warp itself, a mirror that distorts not just the world, but the soul. The demonic thrives not on flesh, but on belief, on fear, on the human need to make sense of the senseless. The Grey Knights know this better than any. They do not simply hunt demons. They hunt the idea of demons. They destroy not just the creature, but the knowledge that it ever existed. Because to name a demon is to invite it. To understand it is to open a door. The truth is a vector, and the warp is always listening. This contradiction lies at the heart of the Imperium's most disturbing dogma, the official denial of chaos. It is the great lie upon which civilization stands, and the Grey Knights are its most faithful enforcers. The ecclesiarchy preaches that the Emperor is divine, that mankind is righteous, and that the universe is ordered. But the warp laughs at such order. It is a realm where thought becomes form, where sin spawns flesh, where reality is but a suggestion. To admit the existence of demons as real, sentient, manipulable forces is to dismantle the foundation of imperial belief. The Grey Knights fight this war with their lives, but also with their silence. Every demon they destroy is a truth buried. Every witness they silence is a soul spared from unbearable knowledge. This is not cowardice. It is tactical ignorance, weaponized delusion. Because the moment humanity understands what it fights, it becomes vulnerable. The demon does not need to be summoned by cultists in darkened temples. It can be born in the heart of a mother mourning her child, in the mind of a guardsman who saw too much, in the doubt of a priest whose prayers went unanswered. Chaos is not an enemy. It is a revelation, and that revelation must never be spoken. The paradox is almost unbearable. The Grey Knights are paragons of truth, uncorruptible, untainted, psychically perfected. Yet they are also agents of falsehood, manipulators of perception, erasers of history. They are not lying for power. They are lying for survival. And therein lies the moral weight of their burden. They know what they fight. They understand the warp with terrifying intimacy. And that understanding has driven them to the unshakable conclusion that the greatest weapon against chaos is not fire or faith. It is ignorance. This creates a chilling vision of the Imperium itself. A civilization built not on enlightenment, but on controlled blindness. An empire that punishes curiosity, sanctifies amnesia, and grinds truth into powder to be swept away by the tides of time. The Grey Knights are the enforcers of this regime, and yet they are not its tyrants. They do not revel in deception. They suffer it. Every brother carries the knowledge that he is perpetuating a falsehood, and that this falsehood is the only thing standing between mankind and annihilation. And still, questions remain. What does it mean to be human in a world where truth is forbidden? What does it say about the Emperor's dream that his most loyal servants must silence those they protect? The demonic reveals the fragility of the Imperium, not just its institutions, but its soul. The warp is not merely a battlefield. It is a philosophical threat. It asks questions that cannot be answered without breaking the mind. What is purity? What is will? What is real? The Grey Knights answer these questions not with dogma, but with deletion. They are not philosophers. They are redactors. They are the final editors of human history, correcting its trajectory not toward truth, but toward endurance. This is their great sin and their great sacrifice. They are what the Imperium becomes when honesty is no longer sustainable, when the only way to win is to forget. Yet in this forgetting, they find purpose, a pure purpose, cruel in its execution, but absolute in its necessity, to protect humanity not as it is, but as it must believe itself to be, to craft a universe where monsters never existed, where the warp is nothing but myth, where every soldier who dies does so for something clean. It is a fiction, but it is a fiction worth dying for, because the alternative is truth, and the truth is chaos. There are legends whispered even within the Grey Knight's own ranks, doctrines so secret that even among the Ordo Malleus they are known only by implication. This is the Codex Unspoken, a hypothetical compilation of teachings and truths that are never written, never spoken, and never taught in full. It is not a book in any conventional sense. It is a constellation of half-memories, encoded instincts, and psychic impressions passed from librarian to librarian, from Supreme Grand Master to his most trusted purifiers. If it exists at all, it exists only in the minds of those who can be trusted never to speak of it. The Codex Unspoken is thought to contain the protocols for dealing with entities beyond even the comprehension of the demon hunters, things not merely of the warp, but of time itself, temporal anomalies, loops in causality, and sentient truths that devour understanding. It is said that the Grey Knights once battled a demon that had never been born, whose defeat retroactively prevented its own summoning. How do you fight a memory that hasn't happened yet? How do you purge a threat that exists only because you believe in it? The answer lies in the Codex Unspoken. There are rumored doctrines for the self-erasure of entire strike teams, rituals that allow a squad to not only die, but to unexist in such a way that they were never part of the material universe. The ultimate purification. The knights who enact these protocols do so willingly, knowing that no record of their deeds will remain, not even in Titan's sanctum. Their armor is destroyed. Their genetic material is rendered into psychic inert dust. Their names are struck from psychic resonance registries. Even their brothers forget them, not through grief, but through design. Some suspect that the codex contains instructions for engaging entities the Inquisition refuses to classify, not just demons, but primordial warp predators that predate the Chaos Gods themselves. Conscious concepts that devour thoughts before they form, mimetic threats that require entire populations to be silenced to prevent their spread. The Grey Knights, it is believed, have faced such things, and triumphed only through self-mutilation of memory and reality. Such battles are not fought with force, but with precision psychic excision. Erase the name, erase the idea, erase the existence. There may also be hidden guidelines for confronting fallen Grey Knights, brothers whose psychic resilience was not as absolute as the chapter believes. Publicly, this cannot happen. The doctrine of purity must be upheld at all costs. But quietly, among the highest echelons, there are procedures for identifying such corruption and for containing it without revealing the truth. These protocols would be more terrifying than any battle doctrine, for they would require a brother to purge his own kind without hesitation, without mourning, and without memory. A kill without acknowledgement. A death without ritual. There is also speculation about doctrines concerning forbidden technologies, psychic containment systems, warp severance fields, and devices recovered from the dark age of technology capable of deleting a soul from the Imperium. Such weapons are not used, not even stored. They are hidden, perhaps dismantled, but the knowledge of their design is passed down in encrypted memory palaces among the chapter's most senior artificers. The danger is not in using them, but in the idea that they could be used. The Codex Unspoken may be the only safeguard against such temptations, embedding prohibitions so deep within the mind that even thinking of them triggers psychic alarms. Even among the Grey Knights, the Codex Unspoken is treated with awe and dread. Some whisper that it is a living document, not in metaphor but in function, that it evolves, grows, rewrites itself psychically based on the chapter's collective experience. Librarians speak of dreams that are not their own, of visions during meditation that carry unfamiliar runes and forbidden battle signs. These may be fragments of the Codex reaching out, updating its bearers with truths too dangerous to verbalize. In this way, the Codex is not merely secret. It is reactive. It is sentient, a living interface between the Knights and the unthinkable. But what does it mean to have such knowledge and never speak it? To know the codes to seal away entities that should not exist and to carry them in silence. It means that the Grey Knights are not simply warriors. They are custodians of a narrative too fragile to be known. They are the authors of a history that cannot be read. And the Codex Unspoken is the final testament to this burden. A book without words, a truth without voice. Carried in minds too loyal to remember and too pure to ever forget. Even within the web of secrecy that cloaks the Grey Knights, there exists one tension more volatile than any demon blade or warp storm: their relationship with the Inquisition. The Inquisition, particularly the Ordo Malleus, should be their closest ally. After all, it was through the Inquisition's auspices that the Grey Knights were originally founded. Yet the reality is far more fraught. These two pillars of imperial stability do not walk side by side. They circle one another like predators, each holding the knife that could end the other. And in more than a few cases, they have used it. The Inquisition is built upon paranoia, upon the idea that no one is above scrutiny, not even the Inquisitors themselves. It is an organization that thrives on compartmentalization, on duplicity, on fear. Yet even it has boundaries it fears to cross. The Grey Knights represent one such boundary. Their operations often exist entirely outside inquisitorial oversight. They answer to none. not even to the Lord Inquisitors. In theory, this independence is granted because of their purity and their purpose. In practice, it makes them a threat. There have been incidents, records purged, of course, but whispered about among the Ordo Malleus, where Inquisitors who sought too deeply into Grey Knight operations disappeared. Sometimes they returned, altered. More often, they did not return at all. One such tale tells of an Inquisitor Lord who attempted to requisition a Grey Knight strike force to assist in a planetary cleansing. The request was refused, with no explanation. When the Inquisitor arrived on the planet personally, he found it already scoured, its people gone, its surface sterilized. When he attempted to investigate, his ship's astropath suffered a sudden catastrophic psychic implosion. Shortly after, the Inquisitor was declared heretical by an unsigned edict and vanished into Imperial custody. The implication was clear. Do not look too closely. Yet not all interactions are hostile. Many Inquisitors, particularly those who have fought alongside the Knights, develop a reverent fear of them. They speak of warriors who walk like living prayers, whose presence is a psychic balm against corruption. They are allies, but allies who leave one trembling in their wake. Inquisitors who survive such encounters often refuse to speak of them, or do so only in cryptic parables. This reverence masks a deeper truth. The Inquisition fears what the Grey Knights know. Because in a universe where knowledge is poison, the Knights are walking apothecaries of damnation. There is a persistent rumor of an inquisitorial vault on Terra, a psychic black chamber sealed with warp null metals holding a single librarian of the Grey Knights in perpetual stasis. The reason? Unknown. The truth? Possibly unknowable. Some say he saw something the Inquisition could not allow to escape, even in death. Others say he volunteered, offering himself as the seal to a truth too dangerous to destroy. Whatever the reality, it speaks volumes about the balance of terror between these two entities. Still, cooperation exists. There are battlefields where the Grey Knights answer the summons of the Inquisition without delay, where operations are conducted in harmony. But even in these moments, there is a strict delineation. The Inquisitor directs, but only until the Knights arrive. After that, command is transferred, tacitly, instantly, and without resistance. The battlefield becomes a stage for ritual, not strategy, and the Inquisitor becomes a witness, not a leader. The rarest and most terrifying interaction is what some Inquisitors call sanctioned silencing. This occurs when an Inquisitor agrees or is compelled to forget. Memories are psychically extracted, replaced with false visions, timelines altered. In some cases, these operations are voluntary, an Inquisitor choosing ignorance to maintain sanity. In others, it is a punishment, a neutralization disguised as mercy. The Grey Knights possess the means to do this, and they have used it. Ultimately, the relationship is one of tension balanced by mutual necessity. The Inquisition needs the Grey Knights to fight battles no one else can. The Grey Knights need the Inquisition to keep the veil intact. But trust is a luxury neither can afford. Each knows the other too well. Each has the power to destroy the other. And so they move in silent lockstep, each holding the leash and the knife, praying they never have to use either. Because if they ever do, the galaxy would not witness a war. It would witness an implosion. The Guardians of Secrecy turning on one another, tearing apart the very illusion that keeps the Imperium sane. And in that moment, chaos would not need to fight. It would simply watch and smile. Among the Grey Knights, it is the librarians who carry the greatest burden, not because they are the most powerful psychers, though they are, but because they are the vaults in which the most dangerous truths are stored. They are not simply warriors of the mind. They are curators of annihilation, librarians of the unremembered. Their minds are labyrinths, each chamber housing a fragment of the Imperium's darkest history. And they walk through those chambers alone. Unlike other librarians across the Adeptus Astartes, who focus their power outward, channeling warp energy into devastating force, the Grey Knight's librarians also direct it inward. They are trained not just to read minds, but to seal them. They undergo rituals so invasive that even their fellow knights are forbidden from witnessing them. In the deepest sanctums of Titan, beneath meters of psychically insulated rock and adamantium, they endure the rite of the Hollow Book. There, their minds are partitioned into dozens of psychic vaults, each protected by layers of mnemonic wards, empathic barriers, and self-erasing triggers. These vaults do not simply hide memories, they change the way time is experienced within the librarian's mind. Some memories are placed in stasis, others are deliberately corrupted, becoming incoherent symbols only the librarian himself can decode. Their work is ceaseless. After every mission, after every purge, it is the librarian who catalogs the intangible aftermath. He must assess psychic contamination not just in others, but in himself. He must revisit horrors in psychic simulation to understand their metaphysical properties, what they were, how they changed the environment, how they could be replicated by enemies. In doing so, he courts corruption with every breath. And so, he must be watched, not by an external agent, but by himself. Every librarian maintains a psychic construct, an inner warden, a second consciousness built from ritual and willpower, to monitor his own thoughts. Should any taint arise, the warden acts immediately, either triggering a purge or initiating psychic self-destruction. But their role goes even deeper. The librarians are the gatekeepers of memory for the entire chapter. They conduct psychic audits of their brothers, scanning for signs of intrusion or knowledge that was not meant to survive. Sometimes they excise a single image. Sometimes they erase entire missions. And sometimes they must do more. When a brother becomes unstable, haunted by a vision that cannot be removed, the librarian offers absolution, not with words, but with oblivion. A psychic touch, a flash of light, and the burden is gone. So is the memory. So often is the brother. It is also believed that the librarians are the final line of defense, should Titan itself fall. In such a scenario, a psychic deadlock would be activated, a network of minds linked in a last desperate act of erasure. They would wipe Titan from the warp, sever its psychic signature, rendering it invisible even to demons. In doing so, they would erase themselves as well. Not just their bodies, but their souls. No afterlife in the Emperor's light, no place in the warp, just nothingness. It is the final vow of a librarian that should knowledge become too dangerous, he will become its tomb. Some whisper that the most senior among them, the Grand Librarians, can access memories of the Emperor himself. Not as fact, but as inherited psychic impressions woven into the gene seed. These visions are never shared. They are not spoken of. But in moments of dire need, they guide the chapter like echoes from a forgotten god. Whether these are true memories or illusions born of immense psychic strain is irrelevant. They are the compass by which the Grey Knights navigate the storm. There are librarians who have forgotten more than entire sectors have known. They carry the weight of extinct planets, of entire civilizations purged for knowledge no longer permissible. They do not sleep. They meditate in silence, their minds walking halls of pain and fire, forever searching for fractures in memory, for signs that something remembered too well might become real again. They are feared, even among their brothers, not for their power, but for what they carry. To look into a librarian's eyes is to glimpse a mind that remembers the forgotten and forgets the remembered. A mind that is not its own, but a vault, a cage, a library of horrors too vital to burn and too dangerous to read. This is their purpose. To know what must not be known, to remember what must not be remembered, to hold in their minds the very truths that could unravel mankind, and to walk through the galaxy with that burden, never wavering, never faltering. They are the keepers of oblivion, and in their silence, the Imperium endures. There is a term within the halls of Titan that is never uttered lightly: purity by annihilation. It is not a threat nor a boast. It is a doctrine, a final recourse when all else has failed. For the Grey Knights, the concept of purity is not abstract. It is measurable, tangible, quantifiable in the ripples of the warp and the scent of psychic rot. When a world cannot be cleansed, when its very soul has been compromised by knowledge or exposure, the only answer is obliteration. Not because the world is evil, but because it cannot forget. The Grey Knights do not wield this doctrine carelessly. They are not the exterminatus happy inquisitors of the Ordo Hereticus, nor the flame-hungry zealots of the ecclesiarchy. They understand the magnitude of what they do, but they also understand the stakes. When a planet becomes a wound in the fabric of reality, when every stone and shadow bears the imprint of demonic truth, there is no redemption. There is only erasure. These operations are clinical, ritualistic, almost mournful. Entire strike forces are deployed not to fight, but to prepare. Sanctified warheads are blessed by Titan's own artisans. Orbital lances are calibrated to sever psychic ley lines. Even virus bombs are encoded with anti-warp sigils to ensure that no echo of what once lived can be heard by the warp. And when the order is given, there is no fanfare. The world simply ceases to be, a light extinguished not in rage, but in necessity. There are documented cases, if one knows where to look, hidden in the redacted vaults of the Ordo Malleus. One such world, Coral Prime, resisted a demonic incursion with astonishing resilience. Its defenders adapted to warp-touched foes, developing psychic countermeasures that rivaled sanctioned techniques. But in doing so, they became contaminated by understanding. The Grey Knights arrived not to save them, but to unmake them. Coral Prime was reduced to radioactive glass within 3 hours. Its name was erased from all star charts, its history rewritten as a failed mining colony lost to geological collapse. In these moments, the Grey Knights act not as warriors, but as custodians of memory. They do not relish the kill. They perform it because it must be done. They walk the edges of morality with steady feet, bearing the unthinkable truth that sometimes the only way to save humanity is to destroy it. They are not butchers. They are surgeons. They cut to stop the spread. The psychic trauma of these purges is immense. Even the knights themselves are not immune. After such missions, entire squads are placed in stasis for psychic rehabilitation. Librarians isolate their minds, removing the emotional resonance of what they've done. Some never recover. A few are taken into the Vault of Silence beneath Titan, where they meditate for decades, or longer, until the burden becomes bearable again. And yet, this doctrine has preserved the Imperium time and time again. There are thousands of worlds that never fell because a single one was erased. Entire sectors remain ignorant of the horrors that almost claimed them, spared because the source of their contamination was annihilated before it could whisper beyond its own gravity well. The price is horrific, but the alternative is worse. There is also the darker implication, one that is never discussed aloud, that sometimes a world is destroyed not because it is corrupted, but because it understood too much, because it glimpsed the machinery of the Imperium's protection and dared to ask why. The Grey Knights are not executioners of rebellion, but they are guardians of narrative. When a planet's survival threatens to unravel the veil of sanctioned ignorance, it becomes a liability, and liabilities are purged. The phrase purity by annihilation is engraved above the blast chambers of Titan's orbital exterminatus array. It is not a warning, it is a vow, a reminder that in a universe where knowledge is more dangerous than flame, sometimes the only mercy is silence, total, absolute, final. And so, the Grey Knights continue their terrible work. They do not question, they do not mourn, they preserve, through destruction, through erasure, through annihilation made sacred by necessity, and in their wake only silence remains. Across the millennia of warfare, countless victories have been recorded in the annals of the Imperium, but some triumphs leave behind nothing but ash and silence. These are the battles where the Grey Knights fought, not for glory, not even for survival, but for concealment. And in their wake, What lingers is not memory or honor, but a haunting absence. This is the legacy of ash and silence, the unremembered war that preserves the Imperium's illusion of order. There are planets that no longer exist on any star chart, civilizations that rose, fought, and were unmade, not by chaos, but by the desperate measures taken to ensure chaos would never be known. Entire systems have been wiped clean, not because they failed, but because they succeeded in a way that could not be allowed to endure. When a world glimpses too much, when it resists the warp too well or learns to manipulate forbidden knowledge to survive, its future becomes a threat, not to its neighbors, but to the narrative of the Imperium itself. The Grey Knights are the agents of that narrative. They are the editors of history, the ones who redact the moments that do not fit, and in doing so, they preserve a myth that is more necessary than any truth, the myth of imperial dominance. That chaos is always defeated, that the Emperor's light shines unbroken, that the warp is a distant, tameable force. This myth is fragile, but it is vital. It keeps the teeming masses in prayer and the Astra Militarum in motion. The truth would shatter the Imperium not with bolts or bombs, but with despair. And so, the Grey Knights erase. But the weight of their silence grows heavier with each passing century. For every battle fought in darkness, there is a toll, a psychic erosion, a spiritual fracture. The Knights return from these missions changed, not visibly, but internally. They forget because they must. But the absence lingers, like a missing limb. A brother captain may stand in his sanctum and feel that something is gone, something vital, some connection to a war he cannot recall. These gaps are not just tactical, they are personal. The chapter itself bears the scars. Titan's librarium has vaults that no one opens, doors that are locked with sigils known only to ghosts. There are weapons in its armory without records, relics drenched in psychic resonance from worlds that have no name. And in the Hall of Echoes there are statues with blank plaques, tributes to knights who fell in battles that were never permitted to exist. These memorials are not reminders of glory. They are testaments to a cost no one is allowed to discuss. Even the Imperium's broader machinery feels the dissonance. Administratum records show odd gaps, supply lines that fed vanished planets, tithes collected from colonies that were never founded. The ecclesiarchy sometimes uncovers heretical texts, not because of corruption, but because someone remembered something they were never meant to recall. These anomalies are quickly corrected, sometimes by the Inquisition, sometimes by the Grey Knights themselves. But this endless redaction comes at a price. The more the Imperium forgets, the more vulnerable it becomes to the truths that remain. There is a growing fragility in the warp, a sense that the lies are cracking, that the veil is wearing thin. Demonic incursions grow more frequent. Psychic instability surges in regions once considered tame. Perhaps this is the long echo of past silence, knowledge suppressed so completely that even the defenses it once inspired have vanished. The Knights know this, and still they continue, because they must. For the Grey Knights, the burden is not just to fight chaos, but to ensure it leaves no mark, and in doing so, they have become not just defenders of the Imperium, but sculptors of its soul. They decide what is remembered, they decide what is real, and they pay the price with their own identity, their own peace, their own humanity. What kind of Imperium are they preserving? One that fears truth, one that survives not by strength, but by blindness. And perhaps that is the only kind of Imperium that can survive. But in the silence they leave behind, in the ash of 1,000 worlds, a question lingers, unasked, unanswered, unavoidable. Is this survival worth the forgetting? Is the lie they protect more sacred than the truth they destroy? The Grey Knights do not answer. They do not need to. They simply do what must be done. And in their wake, the galaxy forgets. There comes a moment, even for the most faithful, when silence becomes unbearable, when the absence of truth begins to feel like betrayal. And in that moment, we must ask, what is the true price of victory? The Grey Knights have won countless battles. They have purged the demonic, cleansed worlds, and sealed breaches in reality that would have unmade the galaxy. But what they leave behind is not just scorched earth. It is a trail of erased names, of broken histories, of truths too dangerous to survive. To serve as a Grey Knight is to sacrifice not only one's life, but one's legacy. They are forbidden to speak of their deeds. Their victories are not commemorated. Their oaths are made in blood and sealed in oblivion. No statues honor them in imperial plazas. No litanies chant their names. They do not even exist in the Codex Astartes. And yet, they are the final line, the bulwark behind which humanity clings to its illusion of control. Every time they take to the field, they carry the weight of the entire Imperium's ignorance on their shoulders, and they do it willingly. But is this heroism or martyrdom? In preserving the Imperium through enforced silence, they are also complicit in its delusions. They uphold a structure that cannot acknowledge its true threats. They enable a faith built on denial. And as the centuries pass, the cost grows. More memories are scrubbed. More names are forgotten. More allies die, not for failure, but for knowing too much. The Imperium remains, yes, but what remains with it? There are whispers among the librarians, fragments of visions seen in the deep meditations beneath Titan. A future where the veil of silence can no longer hold, where the demonic truths suppressed for millennia erupt like sores across the galaxy. In this future, the Grey Knights do not fight with bolters and blades. They fight with revelations. They tear down the veil not because they want to, but because they must. Because a lie sustained too long becomes the very soil in which chaos grows. And yet, that day has not come. Perhaps it never will. For now, the Grey Knights persist. They do what no one else will. They cleanse what cannot be seen. They guard what cannot be spoken. They die so others may live unknowing. And in the cold halls of Titan, they kneel before the memory of battles that never happened and whisper vows that will never be heard. It is easy to see them as monsters, easy to see them as jailers of truth, as censors with bolters. But this is to misunderstand the depth of their tragedy. They do not act from pride, they act from necessity, because they have seen what we have not. They have looked into the abyss and learned its language. They know that some truths do not set you free, they devour. So they erase, they silence, they forget, and they endure. If there is a prayer we might offer them, it is not one of gratitude, but of remembrance. For though they have chosen to be forgotten, though they vanish from our stories and our songs, they are still there. In the shadows, in the silence, in the void between stars where demons whisper and men must not listen. The Grey Knights carry the weight of what they've destroyed and of what they've preserved, and it is because of them that we can afford to believe the galaxy is still worth saving. If you found this glimpse into the shadows of the Grey Knights compelling, consider subscribing. There are more forgotten truths to uncover, more hidden wars to speak aloud, and together we will remember what others must forget.